Hey guys, what's going on? Sorry, it's been a week and a half since I uploaded. I am actually the world's worst content creator. I went on holiday and I did not record enough content. Actually, let's rephrase that. I didn't record any content to go live when I was on holiday. And unfortunately, it's just the nature of, I treat YouTube as like a side fun project. And with a full-time job and a family, I just find it difficult to find time sometimes to actually record content. However, I did go to Copenhagen. If you're Danish, bloody love it there. It's amazing. You've got a wonderful biking infrastructure. I was cycling around Copenhagen with my baby on the back, just going all the way around the city. It was beautiful. If you're from Malmo in Sweden, cool. All right, guys, I want to give a quick shout out before we jump into the video. I have been playing Dark and Darker Mobile for quite some time off stream and had the opportunity for them to sponsor one of my videos. So I, of course, jumped at it because I love the game. So Dark and Darker Mobile is a really, really cool take on the Battle Royale survival genre. Medieval focused, dungeon crawling, looting heavy, like insanely cool combat. It's been transformed for the mobile. Third person perspectives as well, which makes it a little easier to kind of see what's going on and control. And the combat is super smooth, super slick, and feels really rewarding to play. There are also currently 6 classes to choose from, including the Fighter, the Cleric, which is more of like your healing class. You have the Ranger, so you want to live that bow and arrow fantasy, you can. The Rogue, super stealthy, much more high damage, but can be super fragile. Barbarian, which is my favorite class because, in my opinion, takes the least skill to play, and you can get a lot wrong and still get away with it. And the Wizard, if you want to be much more spell focused. Right now, there are also some really cool skins that you can get. There's a couple of pull events, one of which grants you an Ebon Raw skin, which levels up and grants you loads of extra different skins in game. So you get like 10 skins in one, which is crazy. Right now as well, if you have the Elite Pass, you can also get a really cool Goblin skin. So as you level up the Elite Pass, you'll get different parts of the Goblin skin, including hand pieces, feet pieces, and eventually all the way up to the head. It's called the Relic Seekers skin, and it looks like a goblin. It's really cool. And there's also a Goblin Cloak, which can be claimed via the Golden Skin Exchange too. A couple of extra things as well. I have got a code to give away. So if you go to the rolling banner on your top right-hand side of the screen, scroll down to enter promo code, you can tap in your account ID and type in the code LockpickExpert to get 500 gold. Krafton have just dropped a new update. You can go and check it out on the website. I'll put that link in the description. But the most important link you want to use is my link to download the game in the description below. If you download it, it really helps me out, and you can come and join my guild and play the game with me. New season, loads of new stuff. Make sure you get involved. Let's get back to the video. Okay, so let's dive into it and what we're going to talk about today, because I watched Kairos Time's Weapon Olympics video, and I think it was an interesting video because the baseline was there. Like, you know, you're sort of looking at them in a vacuum, and looking at each weapon in a vacuum it can be useful for like figuring out baseline stuff, right? He used like a lot of the useless rings to kind of test those weapons in a vacuum. The reality of it is, though, is that actually that's not really how we can judge DPS in this game, because you are always going to use the right rings, you're always going to use the right passives, and when it comes to things like the speed shot and the Squid blades, passives are actually doing over 50% of the work for you just due to the nature of the attack speed. So what we're going to do in this video, can't even talk. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to look at some of the more intricate setups for like single target damage. And we're going to figure out what the best single target damage setup is, because I think there's some discussion to be had. I've done a lot of testing on a lot of different bosses and a lot of different dojos and actually come up with something rather surprising. I'm also in an okay position to do this because all of my passives are now level 30. Most of my weapons and gadgets are level 30. A couple of them aren't yet, but we're fine. We're level 29, and most of my weapons are also level 30. You know, yes, I'm level bloody 50 something elite hunter, 56 elite hunter, and I still haven't maxed my weapons and my gear, but whatever. Most of my rings are also around the 53 to 55 mark, so there is minimal difference between my rings, so we're in an okay spot. It's not going to be perfect. It will not be perfect, but it will be relatively close. So we're going to dive into it. We're going to have a look at some of the better single target setups, and some of them might even surprise you. So what I'm going to say from the outset is we are going to ignore gadgets for the time being. The reason being is that the gadgets add a lot of extra complexities to the discussion, and they are somewhat in a vacuum. gadgets for single target, you often don't build too much around, especially in terms of passive rings. So what we're really going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at the passives that we use and the rings that we use. Now, in this case, we're going to be using Warrior's Ring, Precision Ring, and then Echo Ring. Why are we doing that? Well, we are going to be we're going to be testing weapons based on their weapon damage. So we're going to be looking at Warrior's Ring and Precision Ring for the Squid Blades, plus an Echo Ring to just provide a bit of passive damage increase. I'm also then going to check versus Pulse Ring, because that's a flat passive damage increase versus a passive critical strike chance. So I'm interested to see what that does to the overall DPS. We're then going to be testing other formats. Now, in terms of passives, there are really only two major single target passives that are worth talking about, one of which is Unstable Beam and one of which is Unstable Laser. You can add in chickens if you really want to, but the reality is that most of the time Vampire Teeth is better. Chickens are better in certain scenarios, but chickens generally don't add much to the DPS when you're using them primarily for baiting attacks. You'll probably notice that on some of the dojo strategies, especially for one-on-one, you'll be using chickens. The only goal of chickens is to bait the attacks. So in this case, we're going to be using Unstable Beam and Unstable Laser. If you really wanted to go max out on the single target DPS, we could add Auto Zapper to the table, but we might do that afterwards. Okay, so this is the setup that I'm going to run for the first time around. I'm not going to use any gadgets, so we're going to be looking at Squid Blades with Precision Ring, Warrior Ring, Echo Ring, and we're going to be using Unstable Beam and Unstable Laser with Vampire Teeth, just because that's a more standard setup than running the Auto Zapper. So we're going to jump into the cool zone. I hate how many people are in the cool zone. I wish there was I wish you could go into an area where it was just you, because there's like 1 billion people here. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump in, and we are going to use the single target dummy to kind of test the DPS. We will lead with a stealth shot, because that is something that you'll always do with Squid Blades. And to be fair, I'm going to give 30 seconds to each weapon at their full potential. So that means I'll be counting 30 seconds like when Speed Shot is fully in, fully into the mix. So right now, we're 22 seconds in. 4, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. We were at about 3,000, 3,200 DPS. I'll get an official figure once I've had a look. We can see what the DPS increase would be like with Vitamin Shot if we wanted to. Okay, right, let's go in again. Let's have a look what the DPS would look like if we used Vitamin Shot. It's not a massive DPS increase, but if we keep using it on cooldown, it might boost our DPS by about 200. Yeah, by about 200, give or take. So, we can say the DPS of Squid Blades with this particular setup, at my level, is around 3,200. Cool. That's a good starting point. Let's now go back and maybe change out to the Speed Shot. So let's compare the exact same setup with the Speed Shot. So let's do it. Let's drop in the Speed Shot, which is also level 30. Again, we are focusing on the same setup here, which is primarily weapon damage and sort of like relying less on the passive. So we're gonna wait. We're gonna get this up to, and I'm gonna start counting 30 seconds from now. So we'll see how far we can get. Obviously, it will take into account the DPS that I pumped out in the first 6 seconds. But if I let it go to about 40 seconds or so, that should help accommodate for it. All right, we got 10 seconds until we hit 30 seconds. I'm going to let it go for about 8 seconds more beyond that. But what I am seeing so far is that this is, with this particular setup, slightly lower DPS than the Squid Blades. It is ramping up over time. You can see it's sort of gaining over time. I'd say that's enough. It's about equivalent, isn't it? We can probably say that it's a little lower DPS than the Squid Blades. I will be putting figures on the screen based on what I can see from the footage. I just can't see it right now. Well, let's just test it out with the Vitamin Shot as well. And I'll do the same test. Vitamin Shot when we're in. Okay. So, keep pumping Vitamin Shot. I'm only interested to see, I'm not really going to be testing Vitamin Shot widely. Not a massive DPS increase from using Vitamin Shot here. Again, probably similar increase, probably about a 100 to 200 DPS increase just from using Vitamin Shot. But there we go. All right, very quickly, we're going to switch it up to the pulse ring now. So we're going to be looking at passive damage from the pulse ring. And I'm going to start with Squid Blades again. So we're going to jump into the cool zone once more. I'm not going to be using a vitamin shot this time round, just to keep it sort of pretty simple. But we're going to go for another 30 seconds here. And let's see what the DPS looks like with the passive damage increase rather than the passive damage critical strike chance. And on first glance, it looks relatively similar, if not slightly increased. It's difficult to tell. Extremely similar. Looking like we're at a very, very, very similar crossroads. Maybe slightly lower. You can see that it's dropping now, so down to 30 seconds. This is why we go to 30 seconds. So actually dropping to around 3k. You get the very heavy burst damage with Squid Blades at the start, but I always want to test that because it's important to do so. It's kind of how you will always open a fight with Squid Blades. So slightly lower, oh gosh, bloody hell. Slightly lower DPS for the Squid Blades by using just passive damage rather than passive critical strike chance. Let's see if that holds true for the speed shot as well. Once again, we are going to go a little longer than 30 seconds with the speed shot because the true DPS comes when you have the passive activated. I will say that the passive damage stuff can be extremely random depending on how lucky you get with the procs, but from the outset, it looks like, again, this follows suit with the Squid Blades. By just running passive damage rather than passive critical strike chance, it's a little lower in terms of DPS output. Probably, actually, I'd say significantly lower. You're looking at like 200 to 300 or so lower with the speed shot here. The speed shot does climb over time. You have to really kind of go for like 2 minutes to get like a true DPS reading, but looks like about 2,850 with the speed shot with the passive damage increase. So, to reiterate, we have had Squid Blades slightly higher DPS in general than the speed shot. You would expect that because the speed shot obviously gives you the ability to play at range, whereas the Squid Blade obviously gives you a very, very heavy burst damage up front, and it's melee, so it's going to be a slightly more risky maneuver. However, I'm going to change something up now. I'm going to change up the rings. Instead of running the precision ring, what I'm going to run is I'm going to run the echo and the passive damage ring. So we're going to run pulse and echo, and then we're just going to run warrior ring because the weapon damage will go up, and then specifically the weapon attack speed will go up. So we're going to start with Squid Blades here. So now we are more reliant on passive damage than we are on weapon damage. So let's try that out here. We're going to start. You can already see big numbers coming through. Oh, 2,322, 1,338. Depending on how lucky you get with the crits, the DPS can really spike. If you're not getting super lucky with the crits, it obviously is obviously not fantastic. This is interesting. So, over 30 seconds, the DPS is lower using this than the precision ring. Precision ring is more consistent. You're not relying on RNG, I guess, to decide how you are dealing your damage. The problem with the passives is that you are relying somewhat on RNG to kind of give you that consistent damage output. Now, you know, if we went for like 2 minutes, we'd probably be able to standardize these a lot more, but otherwise the video would be going forever if we did it for 2 minutes. So, 30 seconds on the face of it. Slightly lower DPS output, relying on passive damage than relying on precision ring. Okay, let's try again. What I'm interested to test after this is getting rid of the warrior's ring and going for precision ring. Okay, so we're getting a lot of attack. Attack speed obviously very high on the speed shot. But DPS feeling a lot lower with this version of the build. Not climbing as highly towards the 30-second mark. It is going up slowly over time, as you can see. But a similar story, in my opinion, with the speed shot with this build. DPS is just slightly lower overall. Okay, fine. So we've now tested a couple of setups on the speed shot on the Squid Blades. We might ask why I'm not testing any other weapons for the time being. mostly the speed shot and the squid blade, the speed shot and the squid blades are the best single target weapons in the game, just due to their high attack speed, single target focus. But there are a couple of other ones I do want to show you as well, which we will get to very, very soon. Okay, let's swap out Warrior's Ring for Precision Ring. And we're going to run Pulse Ring, Precision Ring, and Echo Ring. So let's try that out, guys, and see what that looks like. This could be interesting. So we've got crits coming from both the Squid Blades, but also coming from our passives as well. I'm getting very lucky with the crits here, I have to say. I'm not doing any passive damage whatsoever. It's interesting. It is probably equivalent to just running the Precision Ring and Warrior's Ring, but if you do get really lucky on the crits, your DPS can go up. So your DPS is comparable, but can spike higher than using the Warrior's Ring and Precision Ring. So pretty strong. Another very strong setup there. You do lose the heavy opening burst damage by not having Warrior's Ring. Like, Warrior's Ring will amplify the burst damage that you have. But it seemed like some pretty consistent damage output there. We're gonna run the same thing with the speed shot right now. Okay. Let's see how the speed shot does. Very RNG dependent if you're running it on the passive side, because obviously you're not only are you waiting for a percentage on the passive, you're waiting for a crit chance on that passive as well. So frankly, like, it is extremely RNG dependent, but looking like this is a much worse setup on the speed shot than it is on anything else. So what are the conclusions that we can draw from this? Squid Blades are actually, in general, higher single target DPS with the right types of passive setups than the Speed Shot. Speed Shot much more reliant on weapon damage than it is on passive damage, whereas the Squid Blades can make use of both weapon damage and passive damage, depending on the setup that you want to run. And if you run the right type of setup, the damage is quite comparable. Okay, so now what? Now what other options have we got to test? And to be honest with you, those two were kind of like the best single target setups that you can possibly run. However, there are a couple of other weapons. The only problem is that one of the weapons I want to test is level 28. So unfortunately, we are going to have to take that into account when looking at it. But there are some interesting pet setups that you could run that I think could be worth a look. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a unstable laser, chicken-o-matic, vampire teeth, because when you run a pet, when you run a pet build, you want to run vampire teeth. We're going to run savage ring, pet health, and pet attack speed. Why pet health? Even though we could replace this for a damage ring, the reality is if you're going to run a pet build, it is almost certainly going to need to have the pet health ring if you would like your pets to survive. So I'm running this because it is a necessity for pet builds. Okay, let's test out the wolf stick. And we're going to use everything. So I'm going to wait for my dude to get summoned, and I'm going to use Tortoise, and I'm going to go for it. So I'm interested to see what a vitamin shot would do to the DPS here. You can see that the DPS is not as comparable single target as some of the others, but you'll get a much bigger spike with the vitamin shot, I think, with this than you would do with anything else. But even with the vitamin shot, the single target DPS of the wolf stick with the wolf and the chicken-o-matic, it's not comparable to the single target from the speed shot or from the Squid Blades. So let's go back and have a look and see what the buzzkill can do, because the buzzkill obviously introduces even more damaging pets. So let's go to the buzzkill. Now this is only level 28, so when you take this into account, we're looking at a level 28 buzzkill. We're not really using gadgets if we can help it. And we are not going to start counting until we have all of our bees. Okay, there we go. Get our tortoise out. And here we go. Single target DPS of the Buzzkill is incredible. We're not even using gadgets apart from Tortoise, which obviously is there, but pure single target. If nothing in the world was attacking your pets and they survived forever, pure single target DPS of the Buzzkill is almost 1,000 higher than the Squid Blades and the Speed Shot, and that's not even taking into account that we potentially could remove the pet health ring. You're looking at 1,000 DPS increase. What I mean, I was not expecting this. The Buzzkill at level 28, by the way, is 1,000 DPS higher than the others. Now, why do people not just use the Buzzkill for like boss fights, for dojos? Well, the reason is that pets kind of suck. With pets, they are extremely susceptible to AoE in boss fights. They get killed pretty easily, even with the pet bulk ring. The AI is a little undependable, doesn't always do the right thing. And also the fact that the Buzzkill is an extremely short-range weapon. So you need to run a lot of like defensive, both passives and gadgets to make it work in the real world. Whereas with Squid Blades and Speed Shot, you can afford to have very offensive gadgets, which will obviously give bonuses to your DPS. And the fact that Speed Shot is ranged, which means you have more maneuverability, you can have higher DPS uptime. Even with Squid Blades, you're going to have a DPS downtime due to maneuvering, taking hits from the boss, you know, just getting yourself out of danger. Whereas with Speed Shot, you can be much more free to move around, keep DPS up on the boss the whole time. That's why, even when we look at these weapons in a vacuum, you have to think about their real world use cases. And so then when we look at Squid Blades versus Speed Shot, even though Speed Shot's coming out in lower DPS, the DPS uptime that you can have on boss fights with Speed Shot is usually much higher than your DPS uptime with Squid Blades, because it's less likely that you're going to be the focus of an attack if you're running Speed Shot because you're ranged. Whereas Squid Blades, short range, you're right next to the boss, you're going to start taking some hits. Unless you have a dedicated healer or you have a lot of healing tools yourself, you're much less likely to have a high DPS uptime. The same with Buzzkill. Even if you did run Tortoise, whatever his name is, Shelly, or whatever you want to call it, you're still melee and you're still short range. And so therefore your DPS uptime is going to be lower. However, it's interesting seeing them in a vacuum to see what the genuinely highest DPS output you can have is. That pet build, you know, no one uses pet builds, but that pet build technically probably the highest DPS build in the game. So it's very interesting. So, conclusions. Conclusions are, these kind of tests are not that useful, realistically, because they're not real-world tests. The reality is that you can concoct what you want from the maximum DPS build possible, but you need to see how it applies in real gameplay in the real world. The reason melee builds are not as strong DPS-wise in general on boss fights is because you don't get the uptime that you would get with the Speed Shot. So even though the Speed Shot looks like it has lower single target DPS across the board than the Squid Blades, the real DPS application of the Speed Shot is much more consistent because you have the range advantage to give you the edge there. The reason that the Buzzkill, even though it has at level 28, 1,000 more DPS with all of the pets involved, going for a full pet build, the reason that is not frequent news is because pets are unreliable, they die quickly, and your DPS is obviously susceptible to them being cut down significantly. And the Buzzkill is extremely short range and has the same issue as the Squid Blades, where you will become a target. And you need to run more defensive stuff or like defensive gadgets. We're not even taking gadgets into account here. So that is the conclusion. And that is why, realistically, real-world testing without the DPS meters and just kind of getting a feel for what works the best is going to be the better way to assess what the best types of builds are in MoCo. But this gives you a good starting place and it's a good experimentation ground to understand. We can see from this that, in general, when you're playing Speed Shot or Squid Blades, relying on weapon damage and weapon critical strike damage is more consistent DPS output than relying on passive damage, although there are these big moments with passive damage increases that can give you huge burst potential, but not consistent damage output over a long course of a boss fight. There is the case with, obviously, with pets that if you have the right setups, there's a very high DPS output there, but right now pets are just too inconsistent and too easily killed because they can't dodge. Pets don't dodge, and therefore that means that they're going to take the full force of a boss to damage, and your chickens are going to die, Your bees will eventually die. Like, it's just a little bit harder to make that kind of build work. But anyway, hope that's been enjoyable. I hope it was informative. Thanks, guys, for watching. I'll see you soon.